On the night Sister Beatrice Montalvo vanished, 3 women heard her scream in a language none of them had ever studied. They were certain of that. The scream did not sound like panic. It sounded deliberate, structured, as if every word was being forced through her throat with purpose. And when they reached her door, the screaming stopped. The room was empty. According to the internal records of the Convent of Santa Lucia, located on the outskirts of northern Spain, Sister Beatrice had lived within those stone walls for 11 years.
It's about
She had taken her vows at 23. She was known for her silence, her discipline, and her unwavering obedience. No history of rebellion,
Something's not
no
right.
known mental illness,
We need to
no
leave
romantic
now.
attachments, no record of misconduct. The convent itself was over 300 years old. Built in 1684, it had survived wars, political upheaval, and long winters that isolated it from the nearby town.
Your sins!
The nuns lived simply. They rose before dawn. They worked the gardens. They copied scripture. They maintained a small chapel that served a handful of elderly villagers. Life inside those walls was predictable, until the winter Beatrice turned 34. Witnesses later reported that the first change was subtle. She began waking before the bells. Not minutes before. Hours. Sister Ines, whose cell was beside hers, stated that she would sometimes hear Beatrice whispering in the dark long before morning prayers. At first, she assumed it was insomnia. Then she began hearing pauses between the whispers, as if someone else were speaking back. When questioned months later by diocesan investigators, Sister Ines insisted that the second voice was not audible in words, only in rhythm. A response. A measured exchange. Silence. Then Beatrice again. Beatrice denied any disturbance when asked. She attributed her early waking to spiritual restlessness. The Mother Superior noted it in the daily log, but did not consider it serious. The second change was physical. During Lent, the nuns observed a strict fast. Beatrice had always followed it without complaint. But that year, she refused meals even outside the fasting schedule. Bread left untouched. Soup returned cold. Water barely sipped. Within weeks, her face thinned sharply. Dark circles settled under her eyes. Yet her energy did not diminish. In fact, it increased. She worked longer in the gardens. She volunteered for night prayer alone in the chapel. One evening, Sister Marta found her kneeling on the stone floor long after the candles had burned down. Her lips were moving rapidly. Sister Marta approached quietly, thinking she might be praying the rosary. But she was not holding beads. She was tracing symbols into the dust on the floor. Symbols no one recognized. When confronted, Beatrice calmly wiped the markings away with her sleeve and said they were old letters remembered from dreams. The Mother Superior documented the behavior and contacted a physician from the town. The doctor arrived 2 days later. He examined Beatrice in the small infirmary room. He found no fever, no infection, no neurological irregularities. Her pulse was steady. Her eyes were reactive. Her speech was coherent. He suggested exhaustion and recommended rest. Beatrice agreed politely. That night, the whispering grew louder. This time, multiple sisters heard it. The sound did not resemble prayer. It was rhythmic, almost chanted, rising and falling in measured cadence. Some described it as melodic. Others said it was harsh and sharp, like metal scraping stone. The following morning, the Mother Superior requested Beatrice recite a simple prayer in Spanish. She began correctly. Then, midway through, her voice shifted. Witnesses described it as deeper, though her posture did not change. The words that followed were not Spanish. They were not Italian or French. They were not any modern language spoken within the convent. Sister Ines, who had once studied basic liturgical texts, felt a chill run through her body. The structure sounded ancient. Later examination of the written testimony confirmed the language resembled Latin. But Beatrice had never formally studied Latin. The convent's liturgy had been conducted in Spanish for decades. The sisters did not receive classical language training, and Beatrice herself had grown up in a rural village where formal education was minimal. When asked how she knew the language, She blinked slowly and answered, "It is not knowledge. It is memory." Her gaze, according to the Mother Superior's statement, did not appear confused. It appeared distant. The bishop was notified the same week. Church protocol required medical evaluation before spiritual intervention. A second physician was called, this time a neurologist from the city. He conducted extended tests, reflexes, cognitive exercises, sleep monitoring. He reported mild malnutrition, but no psychosis, no epilepsy, no dissociative identity disorder, nothing that explained spontaneous fluency in a classical language she had never learned. During his final interview, he asked Beatrice to repeat the Latin phrases she had spoken. She smiled faintly and refused. That night, the temperature inside the convent dropped unexpectedly. Records from the local weather station showed no significant change outdoors.
We're almost there.
Yet several sisters reported visible breath in the hallways. Candles flickered violently despite closed windows.
What is it?
At approximately 2 in the morning, Sister Ines heard Beatrice's voice again. But this time, it was not whispering. It was reciting. Clear, precise,
Something's not
and
right.
unmistakably Latin.
We need to
Multiple
leave now.
witnesses later wrote down fragments they remembered. Phrases referencing binding, oaths, names not found in scripture. The pronunciation was flawless. Not hesitant, not fragmented. Fluent. When the Mother Superior unlocked Beatrice's door, she found her standing barefoot in the center of the room. Arms relaxed at her sides, eyes closed. The recitation stopped the moment the door opened. Beatrice opened her eyes and asked calmly why she was being disturbed. The bishop arrived 3 days later. He interviewed each sister individually. He observed Beatrice during meals. He attended prayer beside her. For 2 days, nothing unusual occurred. On the third evening, during Vespers, Beatrice began to tremble. It started in her hands, then her shoulders, then her entire body. She did not fall. She did not cry out. She simply continued reciting the Psalms, even as her voice layered over itself in a second tone. The bishop described it in his report as dual resonance. One voice perfectly aligned with the other, yet slightly delayed, as though an echo were speaking before the original sound had finished. When he commanded silence in the name of the church, Beatrice's had turned slowly toward him. Her expression did not show anger. It showed recognition. And then she laughed. Not loudly. Not hysterically. Softly. That was the first time any sister heard her laugh in 11 years. The bishop ordered immediate confinement for observation. Beatrice did not resist, as they escorted her to a small stone room near the chapel. It had once been used centuries ago for penitent isolation. The door was thick oak, the only window narrow and barred. That night, scratching sounds came from inside. Measured, repetitive. At dawn, the door was opened. Every wall of the stone chamber was marked. Not randomly, systematically. Lines and circles intersecting in precise patterns. Words carved shallowly into mortar. Latin phrases interwoven with symbols no one present recognized. The bishop copied several into his notebook before ordering the walls scrubbed. He then requested permission from the diocese to perform a preliminary rite of discernment. Approval came 2 days later. The rite was not a full exorcism. It was a series of formal prayers intended to test spiritual resistance. Beatrice was seated in a wooden chair inside the chapel. 4 sisters stood behind her. The bishop began the prayers in Latin. At the first invocation, Beatrice remained silent. At the second, her breathing slowed dramatically. At the third, her eyes opened and fixed on the crucifix above the altar. Witnesses reported that her pupils appeared dilated beyond normal range. When holy water was sprinkled across her forehead, she did not flinch. But when the bishop spoke a specific line commanding any unclean presence to identify itself, Beatrice inhaled sharply. Her jaw tightened, and she spoke, not in Spanish, not in broken Latin, but in a clear, resonant classical tone that echoed against the chapel walls. The words translated later as, "She offered herself willingly." The bishop halted the rite immediately. He asked Beatrice what she meant. Her lips parted again. But the voice that emerged did not match the previous tone. It was lower, rougher, and it did not answer his question. Instead, it began reciting a passage that none of the clergy present recognized from Scripture. The candles along the altar extinguished simultaneously. No draft was recorded. No windows were open. The sisters fled the chapel in fear. Only the bishop remained standing before her. He later stated that in that moment, he felt not terror, but certainty. Certainty that whatever was speaking through Sister Beatrice Montalvo was not the product of illness, and not the result of imagination. The full rite of exorcism was authorized the following morning. It was scheduled for 3 nights later. During those 3 days, Beatrice stopped eating entirely. She did not sleep. She did not blink for extended periods. And according to Sister Ines, she began humming in Latin melodies that sounded older than the convent itself. On the final evening before the rite, at precisely 11:47 p.m., 3 sisters passing her chamber heard her scream. Not in fear, not in pain, but in declaration. A single sentence in flawless Latin.
What do you want?
Loud enough to wake every woman inside the stone walls. By the time they reached her door and forced it open, she was gone. The chamber was locked from the outside. The key had remained in the Mother Superior's possession all evening. She had checked it twice before retiring to her quarters. The narrow window was still barred. The iron showed no bending, no fracture, no disturbance of dust along the sill.
It's about your mother.
Yet Sister Beatrice Montalvo was no longer inside. The air in the chamber felt unnaturally cold. Sister Ines later testified that her lungs hurt when she inhaled,
we need to leave
as
now.
though she had stepped outside into winter frost. A faint metallic scent lingered in the room. Not blood, something older, damp stone and extinguished fire. On the far wall, where the sisters had scrubbed away the carvings days earlier, fresh markings had appeared. These were deep, not scratched, carved. The mortar had been gouged with deliberate force. A single Latin sentence ran across the center of the wall, written in sharp, steady lines. Non serviam. The bishop translated it quietly. I will not serve. The phrase was known historically in theological texts as a declaration of rebellion. It was not a line commonly memorized by modern clergy, much less by cloistered nuns with no formal Latin education. The bishop ordered the convent sealed. No one was to enter or leave without his authorization. The town authorities were notified, but the report submitted described the situation as a religious emergency involving a missing person. No mention of possession. No mention of Latin. Search efforts began before dawn. The surrounding forest was combed by volunteers from the village. Snow had fallen lightly during the night, leaving a thin white layer across the grounds. There were no footprints leading away from the convent. Not a single disturbance in the snow beneath Beatrice's barred window. By mid-morning, the temperature inside the chapel began to fluctuate again. Candles burned unevenly. The crucifix above the altar tilted slightly to one side, though its mounting had not been touched. Sister Marta fainted during morning prayer after claiming she heard Beatrice singing from the choir loft. The loft was empty. The bishop gathered the remaining sisters in the refectory and instructed them to speak openly. Fear, he stated, could distort perception. He needed clarity. 3 women reported hearing movement in the walls during the night. Not rodents. Not settling stone. Something heavier. Slow shifting sounds, like weight pressing against the interior structure. Sister Ines hesitated before speaking. She said that when Beatrice screamed the Latin sentence before disappearing, it was not a cry for help. It was a proclamation. And she recognized the grammar structure from an old devotional text she had once glimpsed in the bishop's study years earlier. The sentence structure matched formal ecclesiastical Latin used in ancient rites. The bishop's expression reportedly changed at that point. He requested immediate access to the convent archives. Among the aging parchment and bound volumes stored beneath the chapel, they uncovered records dating back to the late 17th century. The convent had not always been peaceful. According to one fragile document, written in faded ink in 1692, a novice nun had exhibited similar symptoms. Insomnia, Unknown language. Carved symbols in stone. The account ended abruptly. No explanation. No recorded resolution. Only a final note stating that the matter had been contained through extraordinary means. The bishop did not elaborate on what those means might have been. Instead, he ordered the full rite of exorcism to proceed as planned. Even though the subject was no longer physically present, the chapel was prepared at sunset. Holy water was placed at each corner. Relics were arranged along the altar. 2 assisting priests arrived from the diocese, both trained in formal exorcism protocol. They did not question the unusual circumstance of performing the rite in absence of the afflicted. The bishop believed the entity, if present, had not left the premises. The sisters were instructed to remain in their cells. At precisely 9 o'clock, the rite began. The Latin prayers echoed through the stone chamber. Each invocation was spoken with measured authority. The assisting priests responded in unison. The air felt dense, according to later testimony. Difficult to breathe. At the third litany, a loud cracking sound erupted from the ceiling beams. Dust rained down across the altar. One of the candles shattered, though no object had touched it. The bishop continued without pause. When he commanded the spirit to manifest, the temperature dropped sharply. The wooden doors of the chapel trembled against their hinges. And from somewhere within the walls, a voice answered. It was unmistakably Beatrice's. But it did not originate from a single point. It seemed to vibrate through the stone itself. The voice spoke in Latin. Clear, controlled, mocking. The assisting priests faltered in their recitation. The bishop raised his voice to override the echoing tone. He demanded identification. Silence followed. Then a low hum, resonating from beneath the chapel floor. Witnesses later described feeling the vibration through their shoes. The hum shifted into words, not screamed.
Hold on,
spoken.
we're almost there.
She opened the gate. The bishop pressed forward in the rite, invoking sacred names and commanding departure.
What
the
is
crucifix above the altar swung violently,
Tell me.
striking the wall repeatedly without visible cause. Suddenly, the heavy oak doors burst inward, not splintered,
Something's not right.
broken,
We
simply
need to
thrown
leave
wide
now.
as if by immense pressure from the other side. Sister Beatrice stood in the doorway, barefoot, her habit torn at the hem, stained with mud and ash. Her face appeared thinner than before, eyes sunken but alert, lips pale. She did not blink. The assistant priest stepped back instinctively. The bishop held his ground. He addressed her by name. She tilted her head slightly. When she spoke, her voice layered again into dual resonance. I was not lost. The bishop demanded to know where she had been. Her gaze shifted to the ceiling beams. Below, she answered. Search teams later confirmed that no underground chambers existed beneath the chapel except a shallow foundation crawlspace, too narrow for a human body. Yet dried soil clung to the soles of her feet. The rite resumed immediately. Beatrice did not resist physically. She allowed herself to be guided toward the chair placed before the altar. But as soon as the bishop resumed the formal adjurations, her posture stiffened. Her breathing stopped entirely. For nearly 40 seconds. No visible inhalation. No exhalation. One assisting priest moved to check her pulse, but the bishop signaled him back. The prayers intensified. At the invocation of final command, Beatrice's mouth opened wider than seemed anatomically comfortable. A sound emerged unlike any recorded in the church's modern case files. It was not a growl, not a scream. It was structured speech spoken at impossible speed. Later audio analysis of a partial recording, captured unintentionally on a small handheld device carried by one priest, revealed the rapid recitation of multiple Latin phrases layered simultaneously, as if more than one voice occupied her throat. The chapel windows rattled violently. Hairline cracks formed along the plaster walls. Sister Marta, watching from the doorway despite orders to remain in her cell, collapsed again. The bishop pressed a crucifix against Beatrice's forehead. Her skin did not burn. It did not blister. But she smiled, slowly, and whispered one final sentence in perfect classical Latin. The translation, entered into official diocesan records days later, read, "The vow was never yours to give." At that exact moment, every candle in the chapel extinguished. Darkness consumed the room. When light was restored seconds later by a lantern, the chair was empty. The ropes binding her wrists lay coiled neatly on the floor. There was no broken window, no forced exit, no hidden passage. Sister Beatrice Montalvo had disappeared for the second time. This time, in full view of 5 witnesses. The search that followed extended for weeks. Forests were combed again, wells inspected, nearby abandoned structures searched thoroughly. No body was found, no clothing, no trace. The Vatican was informed through confidential correspondence. Investigators arrived quietly 2 months later. They interviewed every surviving witness separately. They reviewed the audio fragment from the chapel. One linguistic expert concluded that portions of the rapid speech did not correspond to known classical Latin. It resembled something older, or something imitating age. The convent of Santa Lucia was closed within the year. Officially, the reason cited was declining membership. Unofficially, none of the remaining sisters were willing to sleep inside those walls again. The chapel was deconsecrated. The building eventually fell into neglect. Locals avoided the grounds after dusk. Years later, hikers passing near the property reported faint singing carried through the trees during winter nights. A melody in Latin. Slow. Measured. According to diocesan archives, the case of Sister Beatrice Montalvo remains unresolved. There is no death certificate. No formal declaration of miracle. Only sealed testimony and a damaged audio file cataloged under restricted review. The final line of the bishop's private journal, discovered after his death, was brief. He did not claim victory. He did not claim defeat. He wrote only this: she was not taken. She stepped across.
Who's there?
And beneath that sentence,
what do you want?
In handwriting that analysts later confirmed was not his own, a single phrase had been added in Latin. Porta aperta est. The gate is open.